my title is Director of Editorial and Social Media. So the social media part is Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm sort of the person coordinating all of our efforts in sort of talking directly to our customers and our fans. And the editorial part has to do with the website itself, popcap.com. We're right in the middle of redesigning it so that, again, it's a little more community-oriented. Traditionally, popcap.com has been a store for our PC downloads, and now we're going to try to turn it into more of a way to interact with our fans one-to-one.
Do you think that kind of fan interaction is more important for a company like PopCap than for other developers?
I actually think it's important for every company, you know, and it's not just every game company. I mean, you're seeing this being important to places even like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has their own YouTube page, you know, with Coke videos on it. So I think this is something that's like developed obviously just in the last half decade, where the notion is D2C is the buzzword, which is direct to consumer, in which you're sort of like trying to like cut away from some of the marketing smokescreen stuff and just and PR stuff, which is important, you know, these sort of big broad messages and commercials, but sort of really be a little more real with fans. And it's a bit of a generational thing too. Like kids growing up today, and teenagers and college kids like are used to a more direct sort of no BS experience, and so you have to respond that way. So it is something that I don't think it's PopCap at all. I think we're early in doing this, but I think pretty much every game company is going to follow suit eventually.
So does your background as a journalist kind of help you in this role?
Oh yeah, the whole role really is an outgrowth of that. I mean, because as a journalist, like that's who I was talking to. I was talking to other gamers. I was talking to consumers, and so that's always been my professional experience, is talking to those people. When you come to a game company, you know, switching sides like this, even though they're making the people who work there are great at making games. That's what they do for a living. Like that's not their background. That's not their experience. And so, and what they're used to is actually going through PR and going through marketing, and you know, a lot of people, especially at big companies, get media trained, is what it's called. So they're like taught how to talk to journalists when they're interviewed and things like that. And so they don't have, even if they're sincere and would like to tell you, sort of drop any pretense and drop sort of the marketing bullet points or whatever it is. Like they've been trained not to do that, whereas my whole background is being real and talking directly to consumers. And so, yeah, every day what I do at PopCap is completely an outgrowth of my background as a journalist. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's kind of a discord between games journalism and game developers sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And it kind of seems like your position's almost kind of flying in the face of that. You're being intentionally honest, intentionally, you know, maybe saying the wrong thing, maybe not intentionally saying the wrong thing, but right. You're not afraid to.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's no question that there's occasional hostility or distrust or worry about the kind of thing that I'm doing because of that. And it's, you know, it is a tricky game I'm playing, you know. I mean, because it's very important with games that aren't out yet to, you know, be kind of close to the vest with things. You don't want to say too much, and the reason you don't want to say too much is often not because of some other deal with another press outlet or whatever, like giving away secrets. It's really honestly because until the game is actually done, you yourself don't know exactly what it's going to be. And if you start talking about stuff in public too much, and then the stuff isn't in the game or didn't work or whatever, fans end up getting disappointed. So there's reasons why game companies are you know, somewhat secretive with their product. And so, you know, yeah, even my position itself was something that, like, a lot of people at PopCap before I was hired was like, well, why are we actually doing this, you know? And so even 1 year into it, there is a little bit of like, I got to keep proving that this is a valuable thing to do. Not everybody believes in it, but luckily most people do.
And have you experienced any of that journalism hostility? Have you like gone like, oh crap, like, you know, I never would have published that or whatever?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, game developers, designers, the people who work on that side have, you know, there is a bit of distrust and often open hostility towards game journalists. And there's good reason, you know. I mean, I think it happens in any art form. It's like that thing of like, well, let's see you do better, you know, and I think that comes up all the time. It's really hard even if the game you're working on ends up not being good, like you have still poured your heart and soul into it day after day, month after month. This is your job, and it's hard to put all this labor in and love, and then have some guy, some 23-year-old, bash it in 400 words and call it a piece of crap and give it a bad grade. So they're over time, developers who don't deal with the press, and keep that in mind too, most developers actually never talk to the press at all. It's only like senior producers or certain people. So the grunts of the people making the games, all they ever see is like this sort of like what they perceive as like either bashing or ignorant lack of understanding of what they do, and so they naturally just don't have a lot of respect for the press. And frankly, even as a former journalist, I say a lot of that is deserved. Like a lot of games journalism is pretty shoddy, and so yeah, the two places I've worked at on the developer side have been Popcap and EA, and there's definitely, you do come across the feeling of like these guys don't know what they're talking about. But on the other hand, the opposite side of that is when they get a good review, then they think it's great and they think that those guys are smart.
I only just now pieced together that you actually did work at EA before you went to Popcap. Yeah. Would you say that you're a kind of that you were activated? Do you think that you played a role in Popcap being bought by EA?
Absolutely not whatsoever. There's no question that I had nothing to do with that. Yeah, not at all.
Of course. Well, so what do you think is social media, is this kind of honest interaction the solution to this dissonance?
Well, I think it can help. I do. I think it can help, especially, I'm very blessed at Popcap because Popcap is the kind of company that fans just love. So there isn't really a lot of hostility towards Popcap, anything. Certainly things come up like where are Android versions, why, if there's anytime something comes out that isn't properly working, like we just released Peggle HD on the iPad, and there were a few issues with things not exactly working. So you get a little hostility there, but in general, I'm very lucky in that I don't face that. But to answer your question more directly, I think that the reason it would be a solution, that I think it is a solution, is that it can sort of eliminate this sort of lack of understanding between the different sides being the press on the one hand, the consumers and fans on another, and the third part of that triangle would be the developers. There's a lot of people just sort of with their own agendas, and in social media you're just trying to say, look, we're just people just like you. There's reasons why these things are happening. 99.999% of the time it's not because we're jerks, it's because it's just the way things are. Like, this thing happened that made this thing happen that made this thing happen. And so the idea is just, you just say that. You just drop all the pretense. You stop worrying about, any sort of official stance, and you just explain how it is, because often it's just a logical, real answer. And as soon as you tell people, they just go, oh, okay, well, right, I get that. So, and then they back off. So, I do think it is the answer, yeah.
Okay, and finally, I got to speak with Jason Kapalka at the Canadian Games Conference earlier this year, and he mentioned that he was the designer on Psychobabble, and that there were possibly plans to maybe someday release Psychobabble as a Facebook game. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, no, I don't really. I do know that, as Jason said, that's something that, we have lots of discussions about lots of potential games all the time, every day at Popcap. And Psychobabble is one of those games that does have a lot of love internally. There were issues with that game, and it involves the content. If you're familiar with the game, it involves words and sentence creation and things like that. And of course, there's a possibility that there could be inappropriate things put out there. And Popcap is a very, family-friendly company. All our games are always for all ages, and so that became the main concern. So I think the answer is, if we could figure that problem out, it's more likely that it could come out in the future, maybe.
Maybe under Fourth and Battery.
Maybe
all right.
Fourth and Battery.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.
The sort of things that I want to do editorially often are the sort of things that larger sites could never really do. Because they're just not set up to do it, and because they have a different mission. Those larger sites